Welcome everyone to this new episode of Among Us, Human-Robot Teaming. Today is an exceptional episode. We have one of the pioneer of robotics, and for me as a young professor in mechatronics, it's a real pleasure, it's an honor to have you here, Professor Paolo Fiorini. And I'm sure this to have you here in this podcast is going to be inspirational for our listeners. Uh, Professor, would you like to say a couple of words to our listeners?
Of course. Thank you very much, Filippo, for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here. The old age allows me to have some sort of historical perspective of what happened and how things evolved. As I said, it's an honor, but also it's very rewarding to be able to share it with the listener.
Very nice to have you here. So I'll be very happy to briefly read your biography. So Professor Paolo Fiorini has been a leading figure in robotics, and his career has built several bridges between theoretical control theory and really applied applied technology with real world impact. He was a full professor of computer science at the University of Verona in Italy. He was leading there the Altair Robotics Laboratory. And before that, he actually spent 15 years at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Caltech, working on autonomous and teleoperated systems for space and exploration robotics. So this is very exciting. I'm sure you have a lot of experience and a lot of nice insight that our listeners, I'm sure they are going to enjoy. And in 2001, he founded Altair, focusing on high safety robotic systems, especially surgical and exploration robotics, culminating in quite big and recognized European and Italian founded research projects. Professor Fiorini also has been leading and has shown that not only pure research can be performed, but it can also be connected to real life. So he has been able to develop different technologies for surgical robotics, teleoperation, autonomy, uncertainty, and mission critical control. And among others, he has been the founder of Surgical Robotica, whose surgical platform achieved European certification and played a major role in shaping robotic research communities. As an IEEE fellow, Professor Fiorini has been nominated as an IEEE fellow, and let's remind this to our listeners that might not be from the field of engineering. You know, in engineering, we don't have a Nobel Prize, but an IEEE fellowship is comparable in terms of prestigious to a Nobel Prize. So today we are very honored of have you here. Also, I am aware that one of the latest endeavor of Professor Fiorini is a new startup or company that is called Needle Eye Robotics, which is focusing on addressing diagnosis and therapy of prostate cancer. So very relevant health issue nowadays with percutaneous approach. So it's a very impressive biography. And again, it's an honor to have you here with us. And as always, we are trying to structure our episode by focusing on 4 points that are just starting point for discussion. And with this, I would like to start with discussing with you the concept of teleoperation and the evolution of this concept towards the idea of human-robot teaming. So for our listener, again, I would like to summarize this revolution, this transition from 20, 30 years ago, where we used to have robots that were segregated in a cage, completely separated from humans, because they were treated as wild beasts, like lions in a cage. They were too dangerous for humans to get close to them. And then at some point, we have liberated this wild beast, and we started with the concept of human-robot interaction first, which then progressed into the idea of human-robot collaboration. And then at some point, machines and humans were literally touching each other, closing the physical gap. And we started exploring the concept of physical human-robot collaboration. And then lately, we are starting to finally explore this completely immersive concept of human-robot teaming. So, Professor Fiorini, how do you see this progression in terms of autonomy levels from teleoperation to human-robot teaming?
Yes, you made a very nice, very complete sort of overview of the pathway. In the old days, as you said, the robots were industrial robots, isolated from the world, and also because they didn't really have all the tools or the algorithms or all the not only safety but just the modeling that we have today. In fact, I remember all the days that we were developing inverse Jacobians for the old Puma, and sometimes it was snapping away, and it was really dangerous. And the preferred, or at least when you had some complex operation, the preferred way to operate them was teleoperation, because then you demanded all the cognitive competence to the operator, and then the accuracy and the remote interaction with the environment to the robot. Again, there was another concept that was somehow lost in history, of the concept of telepresence, where you are trying to provide the operator with as much as feedback as possible, vision, haptics, temperature, whatever, so that he or she could feel very present to the environment. And there was this sort of middle ground that were called telerobotics, and we sort of aimed to distinguish between teleoperation, where really the robot was following every single command by the operator, and then telerobotics, when there was some sort of advanced algorithms in the robot, they would allow to do some, for example, compliant control, impedance control, without the operator knowing it. So it was this was sort of the beginning of autonomy, but autonomy from the point of view of I would say manual execution. The excuse me, just out of a small flu, so I will have be
No
coughing from
problem.
time.
Yeah.
And but of course, in the early days, and I'm talking about the middle 1980s, so really very early days of robotics, there was no concept of cognition. However, shortly afterwards, in the early 90s, there was the beginning of artificial intelligence the way that we know it. In 1992-93 was the development of neural network, or the Opfield networks, for which Opfield received the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. And I remember that point with a little bit of concern, because although they were not doing much, what they were able to do is to take away all the funds to robotic to put it into AI. And we are witnessing something very similar these days. So we have to be a little bit concerned of this fashion-driven kind of technology. But anyway, now is a completely different game. The capabilities of AI are much bigger, and there is a much more in-depth understanding. So now the focus is shifting the control from the control theory kind of point of view to sort of semantic control, task control. What can we do? How do we understand each other? How do we share a common goal? And that opens a completely new perspective that we are still studying.
This is very interesting. We have a song, like we call it like the anthem of this podcast, and the lyrics says shared control, share competencies. So it's like you are touching the core of this podcast. And yes, we definitely agree that the challenge today is about how do we understand each other, how do we share autonomy and control. So I think that this is very inspiring. Would
And
you
that
like to
brings
add
up,
some more?
yes, and this brings up another point that, how do we share, the basic of sharing, whether that control or goal oriented or whatever you want, is basically reciprocal trust. So the issue of trust is sort of underlying the issue of transparency and explainability, which is not just being able to understand what are the conclusion of an intelligent system, but being able to uh, trust that those conclusions are according to a certain set of rules, values, guidelines, whatever. And this is a very, very critical point, because you don't know if you are aware of some experiment where talking about emerging misbehavior, where if a system is trained with just a few examples, they're trained with billions and billions of examples, but they last January, a few papers were published about to train a system with only 6,000 examples, wrong examples. And those examples had the effect not only of course, changing the outcome of those specific area, but changing the set of values of the whole system. And it's really something that was not explainable. It's not explained it yet, but it brings up the point of trust. What if the system is trained with something that is wrong for any unforeseen reason? It could happen. The effect is not limited to the specific case, as propagation propagates through the whole set of connections of the AI reasoning engine. And it really, and it doesn't have any meta knowledge or any supervisory capability to say, no, this is wrong. I have my own set of values, because every value is equivalent. Every potential position is equivalent. And so we are getting into really very difficult ethical and philosophical issues.
Mhm. Yeah, this is very interesting. Like we are getting to the point that different, not only safety but also ethics and different perspectives need to be taken into account. And as you said, this concept of emerging misbehavior, it's kind of like interesting to see how we went from traditional control theory, where you look at stability, you have everything completely set, repeatable, you can repeat the same task million times, it will be the same. But now with machine learning, especially for example with concepts like imitation learning, the same task could be repeated several times, and several times can be slightly different. And then at one time that might diverge, it's going to be, it could be potentially dangerous for the human. So, and then we have all other sort of emerging problems like the trolley dilemma for artificial intelligence, like when there are people involved and the decisions are delegated to the machines, then yes, these very ethical issues can emerge.
Yeah, ethical and practical, because the reasoning capability, the speed of reasoning, and of course the competence, the access to information that the system have is not comparable to the same of humans. and so you really cannot react as a human fast enough, or cannot. For instance, you know very well that there is this AI Act being developed in Europe, in which that requires that all the safety critical applications have a human supervisory role. So all the decisions have to be overseen or approved by humans. But what if the human doesn't have the competence or doesn't have the speed? Or if the presence of the human make the system so slow and becoming almost useless? So really is a very practical problem, because from a technical point of view, the solution is not very easy to find.
Mhm. It's exactly very challenging to find the right balance and the right way of delegating tasks and, as you
No,
said,
it has to be very well constrained. Now the approach is that you have this enormous state space, so to speak, with all the tokens that the machine learning uses to analyze any sentence or a piece of language, and these tokens represent sort of variables in your state variable. And perhaps there are competing approaches where you really reduce the state space to a number of competing spaces, much smaller in size, and then you can have sort of a voting between different solutions developed by system with different perspective, with different point of view. And so perhaps that will provide some sort of protection, so to speak. But the point is to include all these controls and oversight and boundaries at the lowest level. So having rules that say no, you cannot go beyond this, and this is wrong. This is so. But I don't think that we have gotten there yet.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. Like, especially when it comes to um, legislation, is very much behind. For example, within IEEE, there are some committees that are trying to propose new standards. For example, on top of the existing standards for human-robot interaction and collaboration, uh, there are committees within IEEE working on adapting to the new idea. But the evolution of these new uh, algorithms is going so fast that it's really hard to pace this evolution.
Yes, it's
And
very, very.
especially when, in your case, for example, when we consider the specific applications that you have worked with when it comes to surgical robotics and autonomy, I think that these problems are even more amplified, and we can actually consider the concept and trends in autonomy for robot assisted surgical work. And I would like to you to tell a little bit more about this and about your experience, and yeah, and perhaps some insight of your previous and ongoing work.
Yes, thank you, Filippo. Actually, robotic surgery is not only a very important area, but also one of the fastest growing area. Uh, it is driven by an enormous economic and clinical success. So there is a lot of uh, I would say good reasons to invest and to proceed. And the leading company in this field has been
For
investing,
example,
hundred.
Norway as well as Italy, these countries are aging very, very quickly. So the population is getting older and older, and it is actually not only it is required to use to invest in this technology so that we can sustain the society.
Yeah, not only from the point of view of the aging society, but also the lack of medical personnel. one of our last projects was to be able to develop a robotic assistant for robotic surgery, because in a robotic intervention you usually have two surgeons. You really have the main surgeon, and then you have a bedside surgeon, and of course you want to have a very good surgeon to be your aide if you are the a top primary surgeon, top main surgeon. And so you have two people, but the second surgeon is doing, I don't say ancillary roles, but something that is really not cognitive demanding. So is changing the tools, or supporting, taking the blood away, or cleaning the camera, and so that can be replaced by a robot. So we had a couple of projects actually led by one of my colleagues to develop a small assistant, robotic assistant for the robotic surgery. And this is a type of autonomy that could actually be very helpful. As I said, the leading company in this field is probably already developing something similar, because the key point, as everybody that is working in AI knows, the key point is the availability of data. And in robotic surgery, data are proprietary of the manufacturers. And so they have some sort of hold on the technology, because they are the only one who can train well enough the AI to be responsive to real situations. If you and I start a robotic company and we want to apply AI, we don't have the data, and we cannot have them because they're not for sale. In fact, I
But
had
the data today are the new gold. It's
yes,
the
absolutely,
real asset. Yeah.
absolutely. And in fact, we had a project that I was working with the University of Verona and Caltech, with the idea of collecting data from a hospital nearby there. It's called City of Hope Medical Center near Caltech. And so we had all the setup, and we were collecting data, and all of a sudden we were not allowed to get data anymore, because the company realized that it could not give away this valuable piece of information, and so they stopped our project. So it was interesting. But autonomy again is one of the key. Not that it means that we are taking away the role of the surgeon, that for sure is not, but we have to somehow integrate it, share it, or trade it, depending on the type of autonomy that we want to use, so that simpler, between quotes, things, simpler step can be done automatically, removing the burden, shortening the time of the operation, and so forth.
So
But there is a
delegating the repetitive
yes,
tasks, the
as
ones that can
surgeon
be.
delegate to their assistant a lot of tasks. So those can be delegated to a certain extent to those machine aids. And we were able to get some example in my last project. Actually, just published a book summarizing the results of the project. It was called Towards Robotic Autonomous Robotic Surgery, and there we made it all explainable, all logic statement, all very little of learning. First of all, because it's hard to get the data, but also because when you have you have to model a complex task with many potential bifurcation, many potential interaction with data. Really, we couldn't get any system to behave correctly. And so the only way was, although was probably not a complete model, but going through the logic statements and modeling steps that could actually be followed by the machine. But then there is one more step, which is really very tricky. And the approach that we followed was to start from textbooks and interviews. So basically transforming the textbook into logic statement, and logic statement become computer programs. And that's sort of difficult. I had very good PhD students, so they were able to do it. And then you talk to a surgeon, and he says, so we present the work, and also we are duplicating the guidelines. We do everything. Is so that now it's a very good operation. They look at you and say, no, it makes no sense. We are never following exactly what is written in the book. We are always interpreting. And so there is this sort of dark matter of common sense that you really, if you are a surgeon, you have to adapt the procedure to the real situation, the patient anatomy, the patient pathology. And
It's a
really,
work
there
of
is
art, almost like improvising.
absolutely, absolutely. And there is no AI that can do that so far. I mean, it could do by learning from the data of real intervention, but learning what? Is really, how do you
It's
learn
like
that the
for an
person?
artist performing and improvising.
See,
That's
but
actually the
not
limit of AI. We are not there,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. What are the hints, the clues that trigger some decision from the surgeon? So the AI can learn the implementation of that decision, but what is the trigger? Why the surgeon followed a certain route? What was the reason why he chose one way rather than another one? And fortunately, this is still far away, so there's still a lot of space for the human operator.
And within this topic, I also would like to discuss with you the use of haptics and how important it is in surgical operation.
That's a very tricky issue. We started going back to the early days in 1986. We had one of the first haptic device, which is now in a little robotic museum at University of Verona. It was called Force Reflecting Hand Controller, and we were doing some peg insertion, metal peg on a sort of board with holes of different tolerances and so forth. And shortly later on, in 2097, we developed the first surgical robot with force feedback. And there was the first device that was capable of measuring the forces in the field and reflecting them to the operator. So the first usable haptic device. The point is that there is something called sensor substitution. In our early experiments, we were working with rigid environment. So if you are in a rigid environment, there is no deflection, no deformation. So the only way that you understand whether you are pushing against a hard wall is to get a measure of the force. But if you're pushing against something soft, you see the deformation of the tissue. And our brain is so good that eventually, after some training, is able to map the force to deformation. And in fact, many surgeons tell you that they have force feedback because their brain figures this mapping and gives the same information of force. Instead, it's only pure visual information. And so if you really provide on top of this sort of visual feedback, also a real haptic feedback, it's confusing because they see this new type of information, which is they were not used, they not learn how to use it. And in fact, this is an important point because young surgeons really love force feedback because it allows them to learn faster and especially to memorize better the different situations. But experienced surgeons really have no use for that.
They see it as a disturbance,
A
not
disturbance.
expected.
Exactly. In fact, I'm very curious. There is one robot on the market, again, by the leading manufacturer in the field, that has force feedback. First of all, I tried it. It's not really exciting. You really don't feel a very sharp contact. But anyway, it stops you moving. You really don't progress. I'm really curious to see what will be the feedback when people will start using it. Whether they will learn how to use it, make a good use of it, or they will say that is a technical gadget that has no importance, no value.
Yeah, and for our listeners, I just wanted to remind what haptics means. It's a feedback of touch. So we humans have 5 senses. We have vision, we have auditory channels, we have taste, we have smell, and we have tactile feedback. And haptics is a way to replicate the tactile feedback and the force feedback. And for humans, especially for learning, this sense is extremely important. So for newborn babies, it's one of the way to explore the world. If you give them a finger, they will grab it. And of course, they also normally bring to their mouth any object they can find. So touch and taste is a way to explore the world. And for learning, it's been proven that tactile feedback is very important. As for example, if we imagine that we want to train young surgical doctors, maybe feedback, tactile feedback, haptic feedback is very important. And for surgical operation, we assume that tactile feedback is relevant, but as Professor Fiorini said, the old generation of surgical doctors have been operating without haptic feedback, so they are used to that, and they have their brain, as our guest already mentioned, the brain has been able to compensate. So the visual feedback as somehow for them, they have used the visual feedback to learn also the tactile feedback, even though there is no tactile feedback. So that's also very interesting and tells a lot about how our brain is so adaptable to different settings. And Professor Fiorini, you also mentioned the importance of compliance. So, for example, you mentioned this rigid feedback, which is not really the best way to touch and feel soft tissues, right? So, with this,
Let's
I would
give
like to
let's
please.
give a serious challenge to your listener. There is no experiment so far that prove the usefulness of force feedback or haptics in a soft environment. If you, as I said, if you are in a rigid environment, there is no other clue, and that's the only one that haptics is the only one that you have. But what if you are in a deformable environment? It would be very, very interesting, and I've never been able to do it, to set up an experiment showing that there is a difference in performance or improvement of performance if you have visual feedback alone or visual and haptics together. And I have a hypothesis that is that the role of haptics becomes more and more important the more rigid the environment becomes. So eventually, if you are a very soft environment, haptics is completely overtaken by vision. Perhaps some of your listener could be interested in this topic and develop a very nice experiment, because there is also
Professor,
a
you're
side
giving out
effect.
an idea for best paper award at ICRA or
Absolutely,
presentation
absolutely.
on
But
haptics.
I'm retired, so I'm not in this business anymore. And but there is also the problem of sensory supervision. The brain listens or gives credit to the most reliable feedback, which is the one that it associates to the speed of response or something. And we know that if you transmit vision image, vision feedback, or haptic feedback, the bandwidth is completely different. And so there is a problem of synchronization between the two. So would the brain really consider both feedback, or because one of the two is more credible according to certain parameters than the other, it will use only one of the two? So these are very, very difficult experiment to set up, and I wasn't able to do it so far. But perhaps among your especially your young listeners, you get somebody stimulated by these challenges.
I think that this is actually one of the goal of this podcast is to get inspired and to inspire. And I think we are definitely looking at possible inspirations. And with this, I want to a little bit trigger you and ask about your vision for the future. Like, what do you see? are we getting closer to achieving this dream, or is it going to be challenging? What are the challenges that you see, and what are the potentials?
Well, I'm involved for some reason in evaluating proposal of general AI, and I'm really concerned about all the emphasis or the expectation that is built on that. And probably we need somehow to restrict what we can achieve. General AI of what? So perhaps some small field, for instance, robotic manipulation or robotic assembly. Perhaps we can get there. And so what I see as a vision, as evolution, is a set of smart tools, smart robots that can help us in a very restricted field. This, of course, will be beneficial from the safety point of view, because you will not have a robot tired of what he's doing that goes around the city running for the streets. So something that will focus on what he's doing, and in a field that can be very well explained, very well described. Although a human may not have all the parameters available, but again, machine learning can compensate that with parameters of interpolation. And one thing that is very important is simulation. We need to come up with some sort of common language that again will help build the trust and will help agree on the task. If you want to assemble a piece, a part, or a machine, I mean, how do you explain all the steps to a robot? What are the constraints? You have to have force, you have to put the screws in a certain direction, and perhaps simulation showing the simulation. I see it as the sort of robot mind. The robot can show us how it thinks of doing things by simulating it. So we can have a visual interaction before actually the task is carried out. And that's even more important if you're doing something that is safety critical, like surgery. What if the robot shows us, I would do this way, not simply proposing a set of tasks, but also showing how it will carry out the tasks. Of course,
And also,
there
like,
are
the importance of, like, physics-based simulations.
absolutely,
Today
absolutely,
we have
absolutely.
more tools that are built, designed for this, like NVIDIA has developed this new Isaac
Mm-hmm.
simulator that
Later,
seems
yeah.
promising. And but still, some aspects of simulation, especially when it comes to soft tissues and
No, but
elasticity,
in
is very
medicine,
hard to
you cannot simulate because every anatomy is different, every pathology is
accept.
different. So really, you cannot learn. You can learn a general concept of what you're going to do, but then how do you specify it for a specific patient? How do you particularize it? And that's really a key challenge. Are we able to somehow go from the global to the particular? And in the particular have the same success rate or the same understanding that we have on a global. The thing that this company that I started is for addressing prostate cancer, and this seems to be
Needle
a
eye,
needle eye
right?
exactly. Prostate cancer is now an epidemic. It's become the first cancer disease which men die. And so it has a very important impact on human society, and yet it has a very large diagnostic error because of manual knowledge skill, manual skills of the operators. So a robot that can support in a very simple thing, inserting a needle to reach a target, something that is very simple, and yet human makes a lot of mistakes. So a small task approaches like this that can be very well defined, and so the machine can really brings in the cognitive machine learning, reinforcement learning, whatever you want, to identify the target, and the robotic, the accuracy of the manual execution. So, but again, is a minimal part of the whole world of surgery. but again, is a very peculiar, a very important aspect. So that could be a very small step for robotics, but a big step for mankind.
I I love it. I think that you have a good balance between uh, dreaming and being realistic. And I also agree that we should start focusing on solving potential problems that have a high impact on our society, and this could be more beneficial than finding, the general AI and that solves everything, because that's not realistic. And especially in robotics, where we have this physical, critically safe vicinity between humans and machines, it's even more challenging. Um, so I think that this has been really
Yeah, when
inspiring.
you have team working where there is physical interaction between the robot, the operator, and the third person, could be the patient, it could be somebody who you want to offer physiotherapy or exoskeleton to training. Is really you really try to address a word that is very hard to model, and so all these approaches have been taken with a lot of many grain of salt, so to speak.
Yeah, many grain of salt. I think that this is a good takeaway for this episode. And I would like to conclude that for me, personally, this has been very inspiring, and I look forward to maybe potentially explore some of the ideas that we have discussed. And as I always say, this podcast wants to be a stage for connecting experts, but also connecting different generations of researchers, and because together we are stronger, we are teaming, and I really want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your ideas and your time with us today. Would you like to say a few words to our listeners?
Well, well, first of all, thank you very much, Filippo, for inviting me. It's always a challenge, but also very rewarding to be able to give these talks and share this between experience and vision. You never know whether you talk about experience or you talk about vision. But there will be in a week the main robotics conference in Vienna, and I will be there. So
Are you
if
going
any,
there?
yes, I will be
Oh,
there.
you should have told me. So we will
Uh,
meet in person.
Yes, it will be a pleasure. And if anybody else wants to meet and talk, I'll be very happy to meet with
We'll take a
people.
nice photo together.
Yes, it would be great. And so what you said is sort of mixing generation is very very interesting. I was preparing or thinking about this podcast. I remember my first conference. We were about 480 something people at the conference. It was in San Francisco in 2 rooms of a hotel. And now we are reaching 8,000 people in the main conference hall of
Hydra.
Vienna.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, it has been exactly my first conference was in 1986. So we are talking about 40 years ago, but, the rate of increase has been incredible. And so it's great to see this field growing. And we have to make sure that we don't lose the connection between people who are there earlier and the people will come after us. And because there is a lot of enthusiasm from one side, experience from the other side, that would be great to share.
This is great. Yeah, I think we have a lot to learn from generation to generation, and are we also have the responsibility to pass this experience and knowledge to the next generations. So really looking forward to meet you in person in Vienna.
It
Thank
will
you
be
again for your nice words and for your inspiring thoughts. And with this, I would like to say goodbye to our listeners. And remember to listen to our ending song, because together we are stronger. We are among us, human-robot teaming. Goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Through the noise of doubt and distance, through the fear of what may be, we found trust in every motion, in shared autonomy. Not replacement, not surrender, but a fusion of design. Intelligence extended, your decision joined with mine. In the space where futures start.